Welcome to Loving Without Boundaries, where we hear inspiring stories, share actionable advice, and talk about the challenges and the joys of ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. I'm your host, Kitty Shambliss. Welcome back to Loving Without Boundaries, where we have an extra special episode today where I have a beautiful panel of amazing human beings. All of us, everyone on this call, has been featured in a recent article by datingnews.com for the 10 top non-monogamy experts in 2024. What an honor, what a privilege, and it inspired me to see if we could have a discussion with as many of those folks that I already are in my network and just have a beautiful conversation here. So I just want to congratulate all of you for being a part of that article, and thank you, of course, for taking time out of your busy schedules to be here. So welcome and thank you and congratulations.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for having us, Kitty.
Yep. And we are here with Dr. Elisabeth Sheff and Joli Hamilton and Heath Schechinger. And I'd love if each of you would introduce yourselves so our audience can get to know the sound of your voice, because this is audio only for our podcast. And then just do a really brief introduction. So maybe just looking at my screen here that no one else can see that's listening, then maybe starting with Dr. Elisabeth Sheff, if you would just do a brief introduction.
Hi, I'm Dr. Elisabeth Sheff. Lots of people call me Eli. Mm-hmm. I research polyamorous families with children and the intersections between polyamory and BDSM.
Beautiful. So excited to have you here. And next on my screen here is Joli Hamilton, if you would do a brief introduction.
Well, hi, Kitty, and thanks so much for having me. I am Dr. Joli Hamilton, and I research jealousy primarily, and take some dips into the imagination of kink in my other research. And my focus is on helping people who are in that transition phase between the monogamous stage and the I don't know what comes next.
Thank you for that. And I'm excited to have you here. And welcome back to the Loving Without Boundaries podcast. And also an amazing colleague here, we have Heath Schechinger. So if you could do a beautiful introduction just quickly so people can get to know your voice and you and your work.
Sure thing. Yeah, my name is Dr. Heath Schechinger, and I'm the co-founder of the Modern Family Institute. I'm also an affiliate faculty at the Kinsey Institute, and I co-found the American Psychological Association Division 44 Committee on Consensual Non-Monogamy, as well as the Polyamory Legal Advocacy Coalition. It's great to be here.
Wow. And just such an honor to be here with 3 doctors. So I'm in good company. And brief introduction for anyone who's not that familiar with my work. I am Kitty Shambliss, and I help people who are navigating living their most authentic life and helping them free themselves from jealousy and insecurity, shame and guilt, or the pain of past ongoing infidelity in the consensually non-monogamous field and sex positivity space, so that they feel unstoppable and fall back in love with themselves. And I am honored to know all of these beautiful people who are here on the call here today. So I thought I would just start with some interesting questions so that folks could get to know you and your work and your heart and your soul and why the work that you do is so important to you. So the first question I thought I'd start out with, and just raise your hand so that I can see it if you want to speak or just start speaking. The first question is, who or what inspires you and your work? Whoever would like to share first. Go ahead, Joli.
Okay, well, the people I'm sitting with were there before I was there. So I think I might be the most recent addition to the field. I went back to school late in life. I didn't even start back for my bachelor's till I was 35. And I watched Heath, I watched Eli, I watched Amy Moore's out there performing work. I was gathering up their research and using that as foundational premise for what I was doing, and also to backfill my own lack of identity as a polyamorous person, to try to justify my life. Because at that stage I didn't have any role models. So it's y'all. And Kitty, your book on jealousy was the very first one I came across when I was like, who is talking about jealousy and not framing it as a bad thing? So it's you.
Oh, thank you. Well, I'm so excited to have you all here, and thank you for that beautiful share. Anyone else like to answer that one? Go ahead, Dr. Heath.
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, some of the authors, right, that certainly reading Ethical Slut, as well as the book that really, I think, brought it home for me was Mating in Captivity. And Esther Perel's work, I think she just so eloquently bridges the conversation and bringing it to a wider audience of thoughtfully drawing attention to trends that we see in research, in data, and asking thoughtful questions in a way that isn't alarming and seems to find a way of having this conversation with a bipartisan audience that I really draw inspiration from. So I would say Esther Perel is probably the author that has perhaps had the greatest impact on me in the world.
Thank you for sharing that. I love that. All right. You want to go, Eli?
Oh, yeah, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Great. I would say that it was the people I met in my own explorations of being so freaked out about my partner wanting polyamory and being so upset and so convinced that it meant that I was somehow inadequate and that he wouldn't really want polyamory if I were a better partner or prettier or better at sex or whatever. And it was actually the people I remember Ryan Nearing, who at the time was, and is the original founder of Loving More and was still running the organization at that time, was so kind to me and just so sweet and not at all judgmental that I was coming to her group, not saying, yay, I want to be polyamorous, but like saying, I'm so scared. This is freaking me out. I don't know what to do. And then after her, Robin Trask, who took up Loving More afterwards, and Cascade and Jahai Spring were really instrumental, I would say, in being encouraging and so kind about my research. So all of that was more accidental, I guess, at the time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. That's so inspirational. And I'll add a little bit here. I'm mainly going to make this about you all, but what I can say is I can definitely second a lot of what you all said. For me, the book, The Ethical Slut, was incredibly pivotal. And then later, I actually was on a panel with one of the co-authors, Dossie Eaton. So that was incredible to get to meet her in person. And also early on, I would say Deborah Anapol from Love Without Limits, who is no longer with us here on the planet, as well as Betty Dodson was somebody from really that sex positivity space was really pivotal to me really, really early on. And certainly Dr. Elisabeth Sheff, when I finally got to meet you at Woodhull Sexual Freedom Summit, and Dr. Heath, when we got to meet at Southwest Love Fest, that was really exciting as well. So, and Dr. Joli, we haven't gotten to meet yet in person, but I hope that we can. So I want to honor all of you. All your work inspires me as well. So with that, the next question I have is, can you maybe share a moment in your career that was either particularly uplifting or pivotal, and what made that moment so special for you? Does anything come to mind for any of you?
I would say being in a courtroom and having the judge listen to me about the research. The judge was really concerned that this family that consisted of the children's biological father and his two additional partners, the judge was concerned that it would be bad for the children to live in an unconventional family, and really listen to what I had to say, which is refreshing. They don't always. Sometimes they have their mind made up and they don't care what you say. But this judge listened and granted shared custody, did not remove the children from their father. And I just felt so grateful for that judge's open-mindedness about polyamory, and that one of the father's partners is transgender. And the judge the opposing counsel was trying to make a big deal out of that. And the judge shut that down and said, we're not talking, like that's not even relevant to this. And I was like, yay, Judge, thank you for saying that.
So inspiring. Thank you for sharing that. Go ahead, Dr. Heath.
Yeah, I think what comes up for me when you ask that question is early on when we first started the then task force within the LGBTQ subdivision of the American Psychological Association, it felt really important. And I felt young in my career, and Amy and I certainly didn't feel qualified at that time to be doing this work, but it felt incredibly inspiring to see just the number of letters and people that were writing us from really across the world. And a number of people, one of the themes that we saw was it encouraging people to come out, or feeling safe, acknowledging who they were and who they felt they were with the loved ones around them, or gave them the courage to come out and be authentic at work. And so certainly that felt like just a pivotal moment. And then even seeing the inspiration for different conferences or people taking up different initiatives in their respective corners of the country and really pointing to the legitimacy that felt like was crystallized or formalized with us having this established institution indicating that this is worthy of doing research and focusing on. And then I think again here more recently with collaborating with the Polyamory Legal Advocacy Coalition and drafting ordinances and having the first non-discrimination ordinances offering protections. And now there's 4 cities, right? But just over this past little over a year or so, it has been so inspiring. And I just felt honored to be there in Somerville, supporting and advocating on behalf of this ordinance that we drafted. And so that just felt so uplifting to see. It's just what felt like a very historic watershed moment in the passing of that ordinance.
Thank you for all of your work involving creating that moment. And I really just want to applaud you and Amy Moores and everybody, and so inspiring. So I'm really glad that you brought that up.
Yeah. Kitty, I have a much smaller moment, but it's this poignant moment of, I was doing my last research study on jealousy, and it's a comparative study where I'm looking at both monogamous and non-monogamous people. And I was doing it in the context of professionals who really only work with what they imagine is a monogamous population. And the tenderness, so I was presenting the research results to a group of, just very cis, het, straight, mononormative practitioners. And they were so willing to listen to what the data was showing. We can work with our supposedly very normative following clients in a way that is informed by what non-monogamous people are doing. And they were so open. And it was night and day from 10 years ago when I presented on this the first time. And there was a lot of closed heart. There was a lot of closed heart energy and a lot of fear in the room. And so I think it's the work that Heath's talking about, that Eli's talking about, that it has paved the way for a difference, because these are the same folks and they're meeting the world so much differently. It's really uplifting.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I was trying to narrow it down to one for me. I'll share 2 very quickly. One was what I alluded to earlier when I was able to be on a panel sitting next to Dossie Eaton. This was in New York City, and it was we had a live audience, and it was also streaming. And on stage, I was able to say to Dossie how much her work with the book, The Ethical Slut, had literally changed my life and helped me realize that all those years, I thought there was something horribly wrong with me, that I was a former cheater and I couldn't seem to stay in the lines of monogamy. And I got to say that her book that she co-authored really was a moment where I realized there is nothing wrong with me. I'm simply a polyamorous person living in a mostly monogamous world. And that was such an eye-opener for me, and just very liberating. And then the other moment for me was I was honored to be giving a keynote speech at Columbus, Ohio at the Beyond the Love conference to about 200 people. And I prepared very much for this keynote. It was incredible. And at the end of it, I brought my two partners up on stage with me to really honor that we can create modern families, and that's okay. And I was deeply moved, and I ended up getting a standing ovation, which it wasn't about the people standing. It was that so many years I was in hiding and in shame for who I was, and to be in front of 200 people who accepted me and loved me and were also creating their modern families, and to have that recognized was really, really an amazing moment for me. So, yeah, thank you for that.
Did you cry on stage, Kim?
Well, what was funny is I got a little bit too much into the tech. So after I ended my speech, I was getting into my tech, and my husband said, look up, because I was looking down, and that's when I looked up and I saw it was a standing ovation, and it just kind of blew me away. So yeah, that's when I definitely got a little teary, and just remembering it is just an incredible moment for me, because it wasn't just about me, it was about that acceptance that we were creating as a community, that we all here on this call have created as well. So thank you for that.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And the next question I have is, do you have a story from your work that exemplifies the positive impact of consensual non-monogamy on individuals or communities? Anything come to mind for anyone? Go ahead, Dr. Joli.
So this actually just happened last week. Somebody they've been working with me now for like 18 months, and the first year of work was incredibly challenging, and just lots of psychological breakdowns, lots and lots of them. And they were struggling with something because they were the initiator. They were the person, like you just related, Kitty. They were like, this is me. I know this is me. I know it's me. And then when they actually got buy-in from their current partners, they experienced this flip, this shift where now they were panicked because they had, for lack of a better word, permission to live their life fully. And it's taken now 18 months, but I got an email from them last week saying that they're negotiating now in all of their relationships, including their friendships, in a way that they could not have imagined, because now they have access to themselves. Like they actually know what they need and what they want. And it's mind-blowing to me, because this person, super highly educated, they literally have every degree I could possibly imagine, multiple terminal degrees. They've done their work before they ever got here, but they hadn't opened up themselves. And that's how they put it. They said they opened their heart and their mind and their soul to something that they had no idea was possible. And they needed the examples of all the other people who are out here living and talking and doing the research in order to do that. So, yeah.
That's so
the world's
beautiful.
changing.
It is, and we're watching it change. Yeah, so amazing. And I'm here with change makers. What an honor. Anyone else like to share a story that comes up?
I can just share. I think there are a number of faces or letters that are coming to mind when you're sharing this. But I think really to your point, perhaps what has been most fulfilling is that people feel that they have permission to be more authentic, that there's a framework that is not pathologizing, that can support them in making meaning of their experiences, that deviates from this mononormative story, because that's what it is, just a story about who they should be or what might be wrong with them. So getting to be a part of people's stories where there is this realization or this acceptance of who they are, and this budding framework, right? I think the movement is still young and there's a lot for us to learn, but this budding framework and this community of other people who think and feel very similar to them has just been so inspiring, not only for me and my own story, because I think a lot of this, right, we were searching ourselves and trying to make meaning of this ourselves, and then to connect with others who feel really inspired by, I would just say, some of our bravery or courage or even vulnerability in leaning in, right? Because it was certainly really scary trying to have these conversations and taking professional risks. I know, Eli, you and I have spoken about that, you even well before I did, right? In terms of really paving the way and trying to have these conversations when it was incredibly risky to our careers and even our personal lives as well, to be having these conversations and wanting to really just create space for this. And so it's been inspiring to see other people respond.
So beautiful. Thank you.
I've been really excited to watch the polyamorous community itself. Has been super inspiring to me as a group of people, going from this when I first started talking to them in the mid-90s, kind of loosely organized, not really knowing anything beyond trying to kind of function in their own lives, to now becoming this political force that's so much more aware of social equity across the board. In the beginning, people were very much focused on, this is my relationship. How do I manage this? And it made a lot of sense because the community didn't have the gravitas it does today. And to watch the community not only blossom into advocacy around polyamory specifically, but avoid some of the mistakes that other movements have made in terms of being only self-reflexive, and to make these kind of intersectional connections around compulsory monogamy and colonialism, for instance. I am just so impressed with the kind of skipping over all of these quicksand traps that usually engulf nascent communities. The polyamorous community, not that it's perfect, but I think has done some pretty impressive political activism. And I've got to say that's in large part thanks to people like Dr. Schechinger specifically, and Dr. Moores, but also Diana Adams, for instance, has been really impactful in an organized political way that I'm just so impressed with this whole community that way.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that, Eli. That was beautiful. And for myself, a few of you know that this is career number 2 for me. My first career was a graphic designer who worked my way up to creative director. So I've been at this for about a decade or so. And early on in my career, I was a member of the Relationship Equality Foundation, and we were on an outreach effort, and I was given the opportunity to do a 3-hour workshop at the University of North Florida to their LGBTQ plus community. I had never done anything like that before, so I was intimidated and nervous and spent a lot of time preparing to make this a meaningful workshop for these wonderful students. And we had a really wonderful turnout of maybe about 60 to 70 students and also teachers that came to the event. And about halfway during the intermission of the workshop, 2 different students came up to me with tears in their eyes, and they just said, "Thank you so much for sharing your story." I explained to them about what I shared earlier about how I used to think there was something wrong with me until I discovered this concept in this world of polyamory, and took them through some exercises. And they just said, "Thank you so much. I just feel really seen and validated. And I used to think there was something wrong with me as well. And now I realize that I can be a member of the LGBTQ plus community and realize that I also maybe identify as a polyamorous person. And I really appreciate what you're sharing here." And it just really got me in the feels, and just made the second half of the workshop that much more impactful, realizing the impact that the journey I was taking them through was really speaking to them. So that's definitely a moment that stands out for me. And I said to them, even in that workshop, that I wish somebody had come to my college and I'm going to give away my age here, in maybe the 1990, 91 area, and had given the talk I had just given, because it would have saved me so much grief and suffering that I endured over the next 12 years when I didn't understand that this was even available to me. So it was such an honor to be able to speak to the generation behind me and give them some guidance. So thank you for letting me share. Okay, the next question is, do you have a personal mantra or philosophy that guides your work, and how has it influenced your professional journey?
Mine's pretty simple. It's just that relationships can and should be designed by the people who are in them. It's just that. And that leaves me in a spot where I feel very confident moving with people in that they're really unpacking their monogamous conditioning, but they're not sure. Like, they may not have that sense of like, I am polyamorous. They're really in the questioning and they don't know what they want. And I like standing in that liminal space of, you don't have to need to a new label, even just being in that in between, but designing the relationship that you want, however many partners you might have, however you want to structure that life. That can work. That works for everyone. That's not about non-monogamy, but it makes space for non-monogamy to be part of the conversation, and it normalizes it. We just normalize it as one of the options amongst many.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think building off that, for me, what comes up is function over form. I even think of myself as being ambiamorous, right? To me, what has been powerful about coming across this literature and really exploring this is just the space for there to be fluidity over time, right? Like, I'm interested in building a family and really creating a sense of cohesion and longevity. And to me, having that autonomy to be in choice about what relationship agreements make the most sense to my family and the people that I'm in relationship with is what matters to me, and that we are really trying to communicate ethically about what our agreements are. I think that there's certainly a conversation that has been really coming to the forefront around ways that I think the non-monogamy community could grow, in terms of, I think sometimes we romanticize non-hierarchical polyamory in a way that isn't always healthy, and puts a lot of pressure on people, much in the same way that there's mononormativity or monocentrism. I think we have a little bit of non-hierarchical polycentrism, where there's probably a better word from that, but it ends up creating what I see is it's this same pressure to really be more concursive than we feel, or for people to create agreements that are beyond intuitively what feel aligned for them. And so I think that there is in some ways a balancing that would be healthy for the non-monogamy community to engage in. I think it makes sense why a lot of the literature really emphasize coming out of the confounds of monogamy into what feels like a idealized form of polyamory. But for me, it's really form or function, and really being attuned to the nervous systems of the people that are involved.
So thoughtful. Thank you.
Absolutely. I would say for me, it's about staying curious and following the data wherever it goes, and kind of watching the community grow from this really kind of infancy stage to, it almost seems like an adolescence now, and a little unwieldy and wily, like adolescents can be as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Yeah, and I would say I'll share a few here. One, early on for me, I joke around that I'm a recovering Catholic, and so I had to release some of the shame and guilt that was indoctrinated into me. So for me, one of the first phrases was that sex is fun and pleasure is good for you, and really embracing that. And that was when I read the book, The Ethical Slut. It just really resonated with me when I read it there in print, because that was something I was telling myself in my own mind, but reading it in print, I was like, oh gosh, I feel so validated. And along those lines, another quote, and I actually don't remember who said it, was I'd rather be at war with the world than at war with my internal self. And as I was really going through that self-discovery stage, self-acceptance, self-love, that was important to me to move away from wanting to conform or fit in and really embrace who I was from that place of love and acceptance. So that definitely comes out in the work that I do. And then a quote, this one's from Jonathan Fields. I love this, which is, in order to be unapologetically joyful, first you have to be unapologetically you. So just kind of along those same lines of self-acceptance, because I definitely, with the work that I do, I see a lot of shame and that inner critic, or trying to change who somebody is inside to again kind of conform or fit in, and that can just cause so much suffering unnecessarily. So those are some of the things that really have influenced myself in my own personal journey, and then what I'm helping others do, just to release that shame and really find their community where they do feel that validation, that sense of acceptance and feeling seen. So let's see. I'd love to talk a little bit about the impact of societal norms. So how would you say that societal norms and expectations around relationships affect individuals who are interested in or engaged in non-monogamous relationships? Or another angle for this could be, what strategies do you recommend for dealing with societal pressures and stigma? Anything come up for anyone?
One of the things I've noticed in both my respondent slides and my own life is that when someone hears, oh, that either you study polyamory or you are polyamorous, they can either, sometimes it's just not a big deal. They don't care at all, really. In other times, they can be inappropriately like, oh, you do that. Well, then let's do that right now. You and me, come on. And like inappropriately assuming that you have no boundaries, or assuming you have no boundaries in the other direction. So they start this kind of mate guarding behavior, like, oh, if you're polyamorous, then that must mean you're going to like rub yourself all over my husband. Stay back, you hussy. And I think that can be really challenging for polyamorous people who are often filled with partners. You know, once you've got maybe 3 partners, you're not necessarily looking for, some people want more than 3, but a lot of people are like, I'm full. I can't take on another person. So I think non-polyamorous people mistake polyamorous people as romantically predatory in a way that I do not find them.
I think I would, I'd like to bring up the relationship escalator, right? It's the elephant in every room that I've been in around having this conversation in the space between people who have not reflected on why they're in the relationship structure that they're in, and people who have, is whether they've just reflected on that concept of does this have to escalate just because? And something that I'm constantly checking myself. I have 7 kids, and they're between the ages of 17 and 25. So they are in that phase where everybody's looking at their relationships. Everybody's asking them questions. There's so much pressure on them to adhere to that escalator model. And so for myself, personally, as a parent, I'm noticing I have to check my own language constantly, because 15 years into non-monogamy, and I still have the language sitting there, the assumptions about partnership that are in my language at an unconscious level. All of my conscious thought is, yes, of course, you can have any relationship structure, you should design it. But my unconscious reflexive questions, and I see it when I go to weddings or family picnics, or our unconscious questions assume that this new generation is going to uphold this so-called traditional value of monogamy. And it's actually reflecting on it for myself that reminds me how challenging it is to continually unpack the questions and the statements that we're making that we don't necessarily even realize until they've come out of our mouth and we can't get that word bubble back. So I think collectively we can create a different cultural norm, but it requires being willing to notice when I made an assumption in that question I'd like to, can I try again? So that's what I'm trying to do.
Thank you.
And I think what comes to mind for me is that consensual non-monogamy doesn't work, right? Or that there are so many people in monogamous relationships, right? I think it's something like 5% roughly of people are engaging in consensual non-monogamy, but a third indicate their ideal relationship structure is something outside of monogamy. And so I just think that what is the impact on society of having potentially a quarter of people not engaging in the authentic relationship structure, or perhaps not being able to have conversations about who they really are and how they might ideally want to structure their relationship, or even at the very least the conversations that they want to have with their partner about who they are and how they are thinking. And that mononormativity is so pervasive that it is and causing, I think, a lot of harm in the sense of I see data around the frequency of infidelity, and a third of monogamous relationships experiencing sexual infidelity, and it being one of the top causes for families separating, for divorce, cross-culturally. And so when we try to quantify the negative impact of mononormativity, I think it's important that we're thinking about that. How many people have cheated? How many families have been fractured because of this pervasive stigma? And how might that be different if there was more room and it were normalized to talk about our dual capacity to desire security, as well as our inclinations towards wanting autonomy and novelty over the course of time? And so for me, I think that is a sticky one. And the more that we can address that, and I really think that we can take a lesson from the folks that came before, such as Harvey Milk, who really advocated for people coming out and talking authentically. I think that the non-monogamy movement has a lot to learn from the queer rights movement. And I think that we're in this era that it is incredibly important that people who have the privilege are being courageous in sharing a bit more about who they are with the world.
Mm-hmm. I'm so humbled by all of your answers, including the ability, and as you said, Heath, the privilege to have been able to create this platform here at Loving Without Boundaries, because that's partly what this was meant to do, was to help normalize the conversation and bring different voices together. And so what I'll add, just to piggyback on some of what you all shared, is I definitely hear often, even with people that totally understand who I am and what I do, that consensually non-monogamous relationships or polyamorous relationships don't last. And so I love to highlight, just using me as one example, that I have been with my husband for, it's going to be 21 years since we met next month, married 18 this fall. And I've also been with my other partner. It will be 9 years this fall. We've been living together for 8. And he has been married to his wife, who, by the way, identifies as monogamous, to illustrate that poly and mono can work, for 30 years. They just had their 30-year anniversary. So I'd love to just share that with anyone listening as well. And in terms of, as you all were talking, what came up for me was the term microaggressions, just that we can experience those in ways that other people may not realize can over time feel hurtful. And so that's on that side of the fence for people who identify as consensually non-monogamous or polyamorous. But on the other side, what I will say in terms of recommending how to deal with those pressures and stigmas is, if you do come out to your friends and family, yes, we want to feel accepted. Yes, we want to feel loved for who we are as unconditionally as possible. It's still important to realize that you may be dropping a bomb on them. Maybe they're not ready to hear that. And maybe they haven't done the research, or maybe it's a completely new word to them. Even in today's world, I have many people who say, what's polyamory? What is that? Is that polygamy? Right? Yeah. So being ready to hold that space for, be askable. I know Eli and I talk about that a lot. Be askable if you are coming out, and honor where people are at, I would say, from the flip side of that. So I want to honor everybody's time, so I'll just ask a few more questions. One is, are there any new areas or concepts within consensual non-monogamy that you're excited to explore in your future work?
Well, I'm continuing the jealousy route. Jealousy has decided not to leave me alone. Shocking, right? Except everybody says, if you're non-monogamous, the assumption is that you're not jealous. I know that this room knows that that is far from true, but I am an incredibly jealous person. I experience lots of jealousy, and I don't have any problems with that. So I am gonna keep answering jealousy's call. So right now I'm excited to be shifting into some quantitative data to pick up on what are the differences showing up in the different populations who identify themselves and label themselves differently, and how are they experiencing jealousy differently, possibly based on nomenclature, possibly based on conversations that they've had, education that they've had. And what I'm seeing happen in one-to-one conversations is that more people who are talking about jealousy with the inclusion of a non-monogamous perspective, doesn't matter what kind of relationship they're experiencing it with more gentleness toward themselves. So I continue to be excited about jealousy.
Me too. Thank you for sharing that.
I would say that what's really been on my mind is continuing this journey with supporting resolutions and policies that focus on non-discrimination. And I really see this as being where there is momentum, certainly at the municipal level as well, eventually at the statewide level, but also in the workplace, right? I'm really excited about some of the organizations such as JP Morgan Chase that we've been working with that recently adopted offering protections in their employee handbook. So there's a lot of work that can be done there. And it's exciting to be at the very early stages of this concept of being in the Overton window, because I think that really this movement will happen both through speaking with workplaces and organizations, as well as cities that are willing to adopt policies, but also in professional associations. And it's I'm honored and excited to be working with Eli and Amy Moores and a number of other colleagues within the Committee on Consensual Non-Monogamy to be drafting a report that will act as the empirical foundation and then a policy resolution, and really inviting the American Psychological Association to take on this issue and to make statements, right? We're advocating for the APA to be encouraging additional research on family and relationship structure, to be advocating for non-discrimination policies, given the dearth of evidence about the prevalence and impact of the stigma and discrimination that exists, as well as encouraging additional training and providing empirical guidelines, right? So we also worked with GLMA, the Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, and supported them in passing the first ever position statement advocating for protections for consensual non-monogamy, to really try to make it safer for people who are visiting the hospital or in a medical setting. And also now we're working with the hoping to pass something in the American Psychological Association as well.
So amazing.
That is very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Hey.
Yeah, so awesome.
I'm thrilled to see how the children of this kind of early adopter generation that I've been following, how they fare into adulthood. At this point, it looks like they are really kind of better equipped than some of their peers, coming out of these very high discussion, high negotiation families that have a lot of room for people to kind of take on self-determination and self-responsibility, and how they move through the world as adults. And I'm seeing some really interesting connections between their life satisfaction and their expression in the world, that they gained all these skills from growing up in a polyamorous family that really have nothing to do on some level with polyamory, kind of like what Dr. Hamilton was saying with her client that said it's affected the way they negotiate all of their relationships. And these kids coming out of these families appear to have really just outstanding communication skills and compassion for themselves and other people, and really pretty much the opposite of all of these kind of dire predictions of what any kind of unconventional family life will do to children. And it's exciting to see the naysayers be proven wrong.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And for me, similar to Dr. Joli, I simply want to continue on the path that I'm on, which is continuing sharing voices and amazing speakers like yourselves on the podcast to continue to normalize the conversation, continue to create community and work with folks one-on-one who are looking for support, whether that's with support with jealousy or insecurity or releasing guilt and shame or learning how to communicate in healthy ways. Because what I find is when we are practicing multiple relationships, you're adding more people, you're adding more complexity, and it's important to up-level your skills. And that's where, as a coach, I love to help people to navigate that and give them the tools and the strategies to do that. So just kind of digging into what I'm already doing. And it's, again, an honor to be rubbing shoulders with all of you on your incredible journeys as well. Just a few more questions. One is, if you could envision a future where consensual non-monogamy is more widely understood and accepted, what would that look like to you? Does anything come to mind?
I think families can look all sorts of different ways. We seem to have this obsession with the two-person family based on this kind of religious model. And not that I think families should be transactional necessarily, but business models provide all sorts of different ways. You can have groups of people connected with each other. So you can have limited liability corporations as families. You can have sole proprietor as a family. You know, I really like the idea of expanding beyond a religious model of family to a much more non-religious and broader version of families that actually work for people and how they live their lives, rather than this kind of, this is what a family should be.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Yeah, and if I can pick up off of that, that's really my similar vision, Eli, right? Is that I think it's important that when we're having this conversation, we're not just talking about relationship structure, but really family structure as well. And because there's so much overlap into what the polyamory community is experiencing, and the two friends who want to be able to build their life around their love and care for each other, and recognizing how difficult it is for people in our current society to try to have kids and raise a family when they're having kids later. They're not living near their biological parents. Their parents are older and aging, and they're trying to care for their kids and their aging parents. And that we find ways to pass laws, to advocate for financial structures that allow more flexibility in people just creating communities of care for themselves in ways that make sense to them. And there being potential new avenues, whether it's expanding domestic partnership to focus less on romance, or taking the lead from what we see internationally and concepts such as a responsibility union, and allowing a mother and daughter to create and formalize their commitment to caring for each other, and allowing the mother or the two friends that want to commit to caring for themselves and build a family. Why are we not supporting that? Why are we creating barriers for people in creating the families that make sense to them? So I really think having the function of family be prioritized over the form.
Love that.
Absolutely. Could not have said that better. So I just want to add on yes to all of that. And can we allow ourselves to recenter creativity? Like just culture, like at a mass level, can we recenter creativity and stop allowing ourselves to imagine that we understand what the labels we're using actually mean, and be that askable person, as Eli said, be askable, because when I'm thinking about the friendship model, like Raina Cohen's recent book, The Other Significant Others, I think, if we shift into that mindset, that if we allow that to be, then this policy work becomes obvious. Of course it has to happen. And maybe it can stop being so much about sex and therefore being shifted into our terrible cultural shadow of, oh, but that's about sex. What if we recenter on friendship? Recenter the discussion.
And I think that's how we move forward. That is a key component of this broader conversation, even when it comes to political strategy and having these conversations. I think movements, unfortunately, have to go through an assimilation phase where they're focusing more on the similarities, right? Lin-Manuel Miranda said, love is love is love is love. And it captured the nation, right, in terms of focusing on the similarities of queer love and heterosexual love. And we also know that queer love is different, and that really, erased some of the aspects of the unique characteristics of queer love. But at that time, that is what captured the nation. And I think similarly, we have to go through this process of writing a book about the polyamorous neighbor next door, right? And really focusing on how polyamory is not that much different. It's more about love, consistency and care, personal growth, and really creating security and connection in an increasingly isolating world than it is about sexuality.
So incredible. I absolutely adore everything that you all shared. So I'll only lightly piggyback on that. And it's interesting that you brought up Eli's book, The Polyamorous Next Door. We recently came out literally to our next door neighbors a few months ago. And they didn't even miss a beat. They were like, great, that's awesome. We think 3 adults, you're all great. We love you all. And they were very accepting. Yeah, exactly. So I would just add on to everything you all brilliantly said, just coming from that culture of curiosity and love and acceptance, and piggybacking on what you said, Dr. Heath, just asking that question, what would love do? If you were talking to somebody, how would love show up? How can you show up with that curiosity, that acceptance, and just really receiving where the other person is at with love? So with that, I just want to ask one more question, because I want to honor, of course, all of your time. Just is there any message you would like to leave our listeners with before we start to wrap up, or any question that I didn't ask you that you just wanted to touch on before we come to a close here?
I'll cycle back, and I want to mention the people who, in that first question, who inspire me. The other thing that stands out is being able to read. So many people are writing their memoirs, writing their stories to include their unconventional, supposedly, choices. And, I'm thinking about Alberto's recent addition to the memoir set on polyamory lives. It's called Entwined. Watching people just be willing to out themselves so publicly and share the depth of their story is so inspiring to me. Super grateful for that.
Yeah, and I think to build on that I don't say you can do something. Now, more than ever before in our lifetimes, people have opportunities to have impact. If you want to try to pass an ordinance in your city, reach out to us. If you want to have family and relationship structure protected in your workplace, reach out to us. Find my colleagues at Modern Family Institute. We're collaborating with the Organization for Ethical Non-Monogamy and Polyamory and created a workplace toolkit. so that folks know and are educated about how to advocate for inclusion in the workplace. And we're also collaborating with Diana Adams at Chosen Family Law Center, as well as Alex Chen at the Harvard Law LGBTQ plus advocacy clinic to create, as well as Open, to create a legislative toolkit as well. So if people want to advocate within their cities, they are empowered to take steps and organize and really do something and make a difference.
Wow, super exciting.
That's fantastic.
I know. I'm really excited to hear that. Thank you for sharing that.
I would say that people should be aware that polyamory or consensual non-monogamy in general is not for everyone. And if you're one of the people who prefers monogamy, that's okay. You get to be monogamous. That's totally fine. And you don't have to be afraid of polyamory. You don't have to be afraid of other people's relationships. I think a lot of monogamous people feel very threatened by consensual non-monogamy. And sometimes that translates into lashing out and, like negative energy towards non-monogamous folks. And you don't have to do that. You can just be monogamous and keep that in your own skin and be fine. Never have to do polyamory at all. But you also don't have to freak out on people who are polyamorous. You are safe. They are safe. Everybody can be who you are, and nobody has to force their way to do it on other people.
What a beautiful message. All of those were incredible. And I'm glad I'm going to leave it there on that note. That was beautiful, Eli. So I adore this conversation, this incredible panel we put together, and I adore all of you and the fine work you're doing for the broader community and the world at large. So I just want to give a big thank you to all of you, Dr. Elisabeth Sheff, Dr. Joli Hamilton, and Dr. Heath Schechinger. Thank you so much for your time, your attention, your beautiful, heartfelt answers, and being leaders in our community. And congratulations to all of us again for that article that recently came out for the datingnews.com, the top 10 non-monogamy experts in 2024. Congratulations again for being recognized for the beautiful, heartfelt work that you were doing. So thank you so much for your time.
And congratulations to you too, Kitty.
Thank you. Thank you.
Indeed. Glad to be here. Thanks, Kitty.
Thanks, Kitty.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you like what you heard, are struggling with some aspect of your relationships, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit to work with me as your relationship coach, here's what I invite you to do next. Head over to lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply. That's lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply, and book a call to speak with me. I'll get on the phone with you for about 45 minutes, and we'll get you crystal clear on 3 things. Number 1, exactly what's not working well in your relationships right now. Number 2, ideally where you'd like to be and what might be getting in the way. And number 3, the exact strategy to get you there, helping to close that gap. Remember, creating healthy, open relationships does not typically happen by itself. Many often need expert guidance to make it happen. We've helped clients all over the world to feel safe, happy, and secure in open relationships, while not losing their mind or their cherished partners. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply. I'm Kitty Chambliss, and let's talk soon.